That was interesting. I have one last video. We're gonna switch topics here. TommyKay News! A brand new video with millions of views about what's happening in Ukraine, Russia right now. 18 minutes to get informed on what's going on there.
On February 24th, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Confident, cocky.
Look at the title, it's biased. Yeah, okay, let's not watch it. A random guy in the chat says I shouldn't watch it because of the title, man. That's a very informed way to think about life. Good job, buddy. Now shut up and let me watch this.
And certain of a 3-day victory. Kyiv will fall within 24 hours, they said. Russia's military was the world's second most powerful, or so we were told. The war, just a formality. 3 years later, Russia holds just 20% of Ukraine, and it's paid for it with nearly 1 million casualties. Yeah.
That's not true.
1 million.
I don't know. Is that true? I don't think that's true. It's very hard to say. What are the Russian casualties in the Ukraine war right now under the best sources? Name these sources, because I think it's 300,000. Including wounded. Casualties means wounded. Oh, I didn't know that.
It's paid for it with...
A casualty? A wounded one is a casualty? Oh, it is actually 1 million. Reported by the Ukrainian General Staff, covering all military personnel, including killed, wounded, and missing. Okay. Fatal. Up to 250k, based on documented individual deaths per BBC Russia and Medizona. Okay, these figures count only confirmed deaths, though. So you will kinda, if you think 200 to 300,000 dead Russians, pretty much dead, like not here anymore, in a way.
Nearly 1 million casualties. Yeah, 1 million dead and wounded. More than the US suffered in 2 decades of the war on terror, compressed into just 3 years. And that's only the beginning of the disaster. Today on the military show.
So much death. 300,000 people gone because one maniac is like, let's go to Ukraine. Holy shit, man. It's the Russians that should be rioting in the streets, putting that cunt out of the Kremlin. Wounded includes people who have been wounded multiple times.
We're dismantling the illusion that Russia is winning this war. We'll break down the territory myths, the manpower crisis, the
I'm not educated so much right now, but the mega big Russian bear struggles with Ukraine. They take shitty little villages. Doesn't look that good, huh? I would think.
It's an economy.
I'm not that super educated.
The propaganda and the growing whispers that the Russian Federation itself may not survive the consequences of Putin's blunder. So if you still believe the narrative that Russia's got the upper hand, you'll want to watch this to the end. Let's start with the cold, brutal numbers. The Institute for the Study of War's assessment from February 2022 states that
there's an institute to study war. It's actually kind of cool. I feel like young Tommy would have liked to go there.
Russia captured approximately 4,200 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory last year, most of which was in the Donetsk area. This area is only slightly larger than Rhode Island, the smallest US state by area. Comparatively, 4,200 square kilometers is around 0.6% of Ukraine's total territory. And that's where it gets truly mind-boggling. Forbes did some independent number crunching using statistics from April 2025, where Russia only took around 68 square miles of territory. If Ukraine maintains that level of defenses and Russia doesn't step up on the offensive, the war in Ukraine would take another 230 years. That's how long Russia would need to occupy the entire country, one of the surefire ways to win. The same analysis suggested that Russia would need around 100 million casualties to achieve this, against its total.
I mean, that's a little bit blah blah statistics, because obviously it was always shifting with new techniques, with new offensives, etc. It's still a little meme statistic.
Total 2025 population of around 144 million. This is far from a strategy. It's a complete absence of one, requiring a multi-generational investment in war, which brings about other severe issues. But territory only tells part of the story. Let's talk about the human cost of Russian President Vladimir Putin's imperial delusions. According to the latest data from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, Russian forces have suffered approximately 975,000 casualties since February 2022. While we should approach any wartime statistics from Ukraine with caution, even conservative Western estimates from the UK Ministry of Defense put Russian casualties well above 750,000 at the end of last year.
Other sources with the wounded.
To put this into perspective, Russia lost approximately 15,000 soldiers during its 10-year war in Afghanistan.
Yeah, but there's so much loss of human life for fucking nothing. For what?
In just 3 years in Ukraine, they've suffered casualties over 60 times.
I don't know, if I was a Russian, I'd be very mad at fucking Vladimir Putin.
To put it...
That's always the issue with dictators, man. As a German, if you look at Adolf Hitler, Hitler was the worst thing to ever happen to Germany, right? I drive through the Czech Republic, and I'm like, this was all ours. This was our land, and Hitler fucked it up.
Bluntly,
These tyrants are the biggest enemies of their old countries, man.
this is not a sustainable war effort. Russia's demographic crisis was already severe before the war, with a declining and
But yeah, it's always easy as a Westerner to say the Russians should rebel. It's obviously hard to do. That guy built what I think Russia and Putin is very good at is this entire intrigue, spying, FSB stuff. They're very good with that shit.
aging population. The country's fertility rate was crippled by the economic crisis.
Yeah, I want to just say it's easy for a white guy like me from Germany to be like, yeah, fuck that, but it's probably very hard to live in a country like that.
This at the fall of the Soviet Union, reaching as low as 1.2 births per woman by the turn of the century. While the situation got slightly better, the country is still far below the replacement
So Deutschland for Deutsch!
rate. As a result, there's a significant lack of working-age males younger than 30 simply because they were never born in the first place, and Russia is also conscripting from that same lacking demographic. Now, factor in not just the direct military losses, but also the estimated 920,000 Russians who have fled the country to avoid conscription.
Oh, no way, a million Russians left? I would probably do that too, though. If they want to fucking draft me for this imperialistic war, I'm out with my family, bro. I'm not gonna fucking die for your bullshit. Alter, 1 million men left.
That's nearly 2 million working-aged men removed from Russia's economy and society in just 3 years beyond demographic shortages. In short, Russia is literally running out of people to throw into this meat grinder. But to understand the extent of the tragedy,
in my jiu-jitsu club, there's Russian refugees now. It's sad. One thing I learned, I'm going to be very arrogant right now. One thing I learned, I might not even play her 4. The view count is insane. You guys love the news, but the news very drained me very much, so I might play her 4. One thing I learned in my life, I have been with Chinese people living in Germany because I had to take care of them with university. I talk to the Syrians, the Turks, I see the Ukrainians. You know what happens when these people come here? The Chinese, especially, that I was hanging out with at university, Russians, etc., they fucking love it here. Okay, there's a reason Germany has so much immigrants. You have freedom here. You get money from the government. No one is fucking you in the ass, man, from the government. If you like to get fucking ass, you can do that here. No one is mostly hunting you down for your beliefs and stuff. And they like wake up, whoa. Especially the Chinese, the Chinese students. There was a case, it's a true story. So I was part of this exchange program. 20 Chinese people come to Germany and then 20 Germans go to China. One of the Chinese people, this was 2016, fled. He was gone. He took a loan in a bank, 5,000 euros or something, and he was gone. He was gone. He didn't want to go back to China because they were like, dude, Germany is so sick. I can fucking do what I want. This is freedom? I remember in China, adult students, 22 years old, they had to be home at 10. They have to be in their fucking room so they get in trouble.
That is likely going to befall Russia, let's roll back to the start of the invasion. Russian military planners were so confident they'd be celebrating in Kyiv within days that they packed parade uniforms. Combat plans shared with troops indicated they should prepare for light resistance followed by occupation duties.
But then China is blackmailing them with their relatives. Oh, shit. Oh, damn.
In fact, Russia's military logistics were structured around the assumption that Ukraine would collapse almost immediately. Over 3 years later, those assumptions looked not just wrong, but delusional. Instead of a swift victory parade, Russia got bogged down in the
And whatever the fuck you think about this war, whatever your opinion is, man, you gotta show some respect what Ukraine did there. Of fucking holding that shit off. What a fucking military feat of the 21st century. Holy shit,
longest conventional war in
all of us Westerners always yapping, blah, 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 blah. These fuckers actually held tyranny in its tracks, man. While we just fucking bitch all the time.
Europe since World War II. Their vaunted air force failed to establish air superiority. Their tank forces...
When Prigozhin drove to Moscow, who was on a plane to St. Petersburg? Vladimir Putin. What did fucking Zelensky? I need bullets, not the lift. Sorry, man. I respect the hell. I think... history books will fucking
were decimated by portable anti-tank weapons and drones. Their elite units suffered catastrophic losses in the early phases, forcing Russia to resort to poorly trained conscripts, convicts, and foreign mercenaries. The Center for
That's actually interesting doctrine-wise. Don't waste your specialists in the beginning, huh? It seems like.
Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, published a damning report in September 2024 titled The Russia-Ukraine War, a Study in Analytic Failure. The conclusion was that Russia's military planning represented perhaps the most significant intelligence failure of the 21st century. This sentiment was shared by the French Institute of International Relations, IFRI, which posited that Russia forewent its traditional logistical channels due to the erroneous belief that the war wouldn't last more than a few weeks.
That's always the problem with tyrannies. That's why I'm personally not that afraid of China. They lie to each other a lot. Everybody is so fucking afraid to talk shit to Xi Jinping or Putin that they have the wrong information, and then mistakes are made.
In short, Putin maintained the illusion that Russia was a great military force, but the military didn't have the planning or logistics to back that illusion up. Due to the secrecy behind the plans involved in the invasion, many higher officers were caught unaware of the true extent of the invasion and failed to properly stock up on supplies before the war began in earnest. This led to severe supply shortages in the crucial first few months of the war when Russia maintained the initiative. After the initial rebuttal at the Hostomel airport, which was essentially Russia's Hail Mary to conquer Ukraine with minimal losses, Russia failed to properly follow up, with a significant lack of adaptability that has become a necessity in modern warfare. Soon enough, Ukraine took back most of the territory it had lost to the initial invasion, and the conflict devolved into one of attrition. Russian propaganda channels still peddled the idea that the war was a foregone conclusion, celebrating minor tactical gains of a few square miles. But in truth, Russia is losing a war to itself by running out of money to fund the war effort. On paper, Russia retains the 11th spot on the list of the world's largest economies, but strip back the veneer and the situation is problematic at best. Western sanctions have decimated Russia's high-tech sectors, crippled its banking system, and isolated it from global markets. By the end of 2024, the ruble had lost 23% of its value against the US dollar, with the exchange rate between the two currencies fluctuating daily to create incomprehensible uncertainty of the country's real economic status. But the most devastating impact comes from Russia's pivot to a war economy. According to an analysis by Medusa, Russia now spends an estimated 40% of its governmental budget on defense, a level unsustainable for...
There's no way. Maybe 20, but 40? No fucking way.
...for any modern economy. Worse yet, a third of it is hidden under secret projects related to the military-industrial complex, indicating an unprecedented level of propaganda and...
Königsberg back. As a German, it always hurts to see Königsberg, right? Don't you agree? As a German, that hurts.
...paranoia surrounding the Kremlin. What makes the situation even more dire is that Russia's primary source of income, energy exports, faces long-term decline. The European Union has reduced its dependence on Russian gas by over 30% since 2022, and oil sales to China and India are being negotiated at steep discounts. The dependence on oil and gas, which constitutes between 30 and 50% of the government's revenue, means that the country's already lacking workforce is increasingly turning to the one single profitable industry, the energy sector. This makes Russian manufacturing increasingly rely on imports, especially from China, as well as the entire country needing to import the workforce to meet its increasing demands. With Russia losing both militarily and economically, it has few options beyond simply continuing as is and accepting that the war is the new status quo. None of them.
I have a weird question. There's a question I asked myself for years. How do they know where to shoot? Let's say 5 kilometers ahead. I'm like, there's a guy right here. So first of all, the scout has to say the right coordinates? How does that shit work? Mathematics? If I'm spotting... let's talk. So, I have an artillery piece here. Then I'm a scout here. And my enemy is right here. Hello. Hi. What does he tell him? So he hits that. Coordinates? Play Foxhole, you will know. It's trigonometry. Grid points on the map. So this guy has to be very good at reading a map. And then he says 3.5 x large y z. And this guy knows exactly what to shoot. Grid systems. Ah, they have like a grid. Attack B4. Attack B4, please. Like that? Ah, okay. So the scout must really know what the fuck he's doing, huh? Okay.
Is good. Option 1, but not likely to happen, is a massive escalation. Some hardliners in the Kremlin have pushed for using pretty much everything Russia has to win the war, going so far as to propose the use of tactical nuclear.
And that, to me, is the enemy of mankind, like Medvedev. If you reach a level as a government official to threaten nukes, you're the enemy of mankind. You're
weapons.
The next
This wouldn't be the first
Hitler,
mention of nuclear warfare, as Putin himself has saber-rattled on the topic more than 24 times. But this scenario would ultimately backfire. While a limited nuclear deployment, such as destroying Kyiv or vital military sites, might create short-term tactical advantages, NATO would be basically hard-pressed to answer with nuclear weapons of their own. In response, Russia would need to use its supplies of weapons on NATO countries, plunging most of the world into nuclear winter. And even that escalation wouldn't solve Russia's core problems. Russia desperately needs both the land and the people in Ukraine. Bombing them into oblivion makes the region uninhabitable, and the country would lose the potential 40 million citizens, which
Imagine how in 100 years they're still gonna find bombs there, man.
would be used to prop up the failing demographics and work.
Reading Medvedev's Telegram posts is like reading books from an insane asylum. Medvedev is the #1 terrorist on earth to me right now. Easily the #1 terrorist.
Instead of
That guy
resorting
needs
to
get
immigration.
a
The second
bullet
option is withdrawing from
somebody, man.
Ukraine. Russia would likely only use this as a last resort, as it represents a devastating political defeat for Putin's regime, which has staked its legitimacy on this war. A withdrawal from Ukraine without achieving core war aims would likely trigger elite fragmentation within Russia and potentially regime collapse. Putin's government is a
Yeah,
carefully
they found a massive bomb in Cologne last week. It was the biggest evacuation since World War II. Yeah.
built house of cards, hinging on the fact that Putin has been able to get what he wants for the past 2 decades. Annexing Crimea and fueling discourse within NATO have been key geopolitical wins for the Russian president. If the situation turns around, it will send a clear signal that the country's top echelon of government is actually not nearly as powerful as it seems. This explains why, despite catastrophic losses, Russia continues to pour resources into this conflict. The
It's also so hard for a dictator like Putin, because if you lose this, that's gonna look bad. When you play Hoi 4 and you lose a war, you start getting the focus tree of chaos, right? Oh, you're gonna get killed.
alternative, admitting defeat,
Like,
is
he knows
viewed
if he
as an
loses this,
existential
fuck.
threat to the current power structure.
Not
The
good,
third
man.
option is a peace deal, even in a limited form. While this might seem most rational after 3 years of basically trench warfare with
Crazy how
drones,
big Ukraine
no
is, huh?
side can reach an agreement on it. First, Ukraine has little incentive to
I
negotiate
just quickly went through Medvedev's post. He mentioned the nuke 8 times. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, where all of us can unite and don't have opinions anymore. If you threaten nukes as an official, you need to be clapped. Someone needs to assassinate that guy.
away territory after successfully defending its sovereignty for 3 years. President Volodymyr Zelensky's peace proposals demand full territorial restoration, possibly including Crimea, as well as security guarantees.
And again, I know this triggers some people. To me, Zelensky is the biggest hero of the 21st century. That guy is the #1 human of the 21st century for me.
From NATO. Even if Ukraine cedes territory, Zelensky has
What's your
put
opinion?
NATO reassurance as one of his top priorities, even if he needs to step down as president in the
So
process.
far, yeah, you still
Russia,
don't know, we still
meanwhile,
have-
cannot accept
Only 75 years left. We're already 25 years in,
any
man.
agreement
Holy
that doesn't
shit.
legitimize its territorial conquests. And international geopolitics and relations are further complicating the matters. President Donald Trump's administration's erratic approach to Ukraine has undermined consistent diplomacy. In February 2025, Trump met
Did
with
you ever say
Zelensky
thank you? What is this? That's...
directly
Did
to
you ever
propose a
say
peace plan
thank you, man? And he took it like a man. He took it like a fucking champ, dude.
that would have ceded significant Ukrainian territory
Thank
to
you,
Russia,
Johnny.
contradicting the stated position of his
shit,
own
man.
State
To
Department.
think that this guy could win the election 4 years, man. Mamma mia. But
Caused a near-complete breakdown in relations
Don't
between the
hold
two
the cards.
countries, ultimately resulting in Ukraine requesting revisions of minerals deals and the US backing out of peace discussions between the warring parties. Even worse, Russia publicly stated multiple times that it wants to find a peaceful solution, going so far as to accept probationary ceasefires. None
they
of
killed
them worked,
all
with the
reputation, man. No one can trust what they're
30-hour
saying.
Easter ceasefire resulting in Ukraine claiming Russia broke it nearly 3,000 times. So Russia is caught in a strategic
Wait, what?
in Ukraine claiming Russia broke it nearly 3,000
Wait,
to find a peaceful solution, going so far as to accept probationary ceasefires. None of them worked, with the 30-hour Easter ceasefire resulting in Ukraine claiming Russia broke it nearly 3,000
You
times.
can't trust them, bro. You cannot. You cannot trust these fuckers.
So Russia is caught in a strategic trap
you,
of its own
Yankees.
making,
I'm gonna say
unable
thank
to
you.
win militarily,
Unlike
unwilling
Zelensky.
to accept defeat, and incapable of pursuing a diplomatic solution. Let's
look
zoom
at
out
that
and look
thing
at the
on it,
bigger
what the
picture.
fuck?
What has Russia actually achieved through this catastrophic military adventure? Before the invasion,
And once again, I will say it again and again and again on stream. Imagine Russia took Ukraine in 3 days. Imagine the backwind Putin would have had. Imagine the threat level we would have felt in France, Germany, wherever the fuck you live, man. And once again, have you ever said thank you to Ukraine for defending us? Imagine what would have fucking happened, bro. The power Putin would have had and how he would have felt unbeatable, man. All glory to Ukraine, man. Straight up.
NATO was an
Imagine
alliance
that
searching for
alternate
purpose,
universe.
with many
We will
questioning
be-
its relevance in the post-Cold War
that'd
world.
be
Trump
fucking
himself
scary, dude.
criticized the alliance, as most members failed to meet the basic requirement of using 2% of their GDP on the military. Today, it's revitalized and expanded, with Finland and Sweden as new members. The 800-mile border between Finland and Russia practically doubled the NATO-Russia border, significantly curbing Russia's ability to actually defend
I'm
itself.
also sad. I just want to share emotions a bit. Imagine Russia was just like us. a democratic country with oligarchs leading everything. Everything is corrupt, but at least a bit Westerner. And you could just fucking chill with each other,
in a theoretical
right?
conflict against the economically larger, demographically stronger, and militarily more modern alliance. Specifically, the biggest changes came to countries that can hold large sway in the alliance. Germany, one of the world's largest economies, instituted new funding incentives for national...
Crazy how Germany is so fucking small, but it's the third biggest economy. German Brüder, bald geht's wieder los, auf in den Osten!
defense. Poland, which was once a member of the Warsaw Pact, plans to create the largest standing army in Europe. Sweden and Finland have pushed their military-industrial complexes to the limit, sending prototypes of vital equipment to Ukraine and partnering with US and UK contractors to deliver deadlier weapons. Diplomatically...
But the saddest thing is, I hate this about us Germans, we're the most negative people. If you talk to any German streets, they're so negative. Everything sucks, man, but damn, we have it so well.
Russia has transformed from a respected, if difficult, global power into a pariah state with limited international options. Russia's largest trading partner switched from the EU to China, a country that is even more dependent on resources and can significantly undermine Russian policies to get access to them. All of these issues come from a single problem that Russia failed to account for: the glaring gap between its projected military power and actual combat performance. Before February 2022, Russia's military was widely considered the world's second most formidable fighting force. Military analysts routinely cited its 1,320,000 active duty personnel, 2 million reservists, 6,000 tanks, and 4,000 aircraft as evidence of overwhelming strength. Annual military parades showcased supposedly cutting-edge equipment like the T-14 Armata tank, Su-57 stealth fighter, and hypersonic missiles. The Global Firepower Index consistently ranked Russia second, only to the United States.
But is it interesting how these stats seem to be a pile of baloney, man? I mean, obviously the facts show.
Military planners built entire defense strategies around countering this perceived threat. And when the second largest military invaded a smaller neighbor, it turned out that none of the statistics really mattered. Instead of the feared Russian colossus, we saw...
This is a propaganda video? What is propaganda about this? The guy's using facts. They war ranked too. Couldn't take Ukraine. What the... I hate viewers like this. This entire video is shit, man. You fucking dumbo? Is your IQ below 80? Fuck's wrong with you, kid?
Elite paratroopers dropped into Hostomel Airport without proper support, resulting in a complete failure to establish the air tunnel necessary to win the invasion. 40-mile-long armored columns running out of fuel just miles from their own borders. Tanks deployed without infantry support, making them easy prey.
I remember the best part of the war. I remember I was streaming it. So Prigozhin is driving to Moscow, and I'm live on Twitch, right? And there was this general with the bald guy, and he was like doing a statement, and I will never forget. And he was like, Prigozhin, what the fuck? You're like the fucking general, bro, and you're fucking drunk.
Pray for Ukrainian anti-tank teams. Russia resorting to sending human wave attacks, a tactic considered fit for World War I. Logistics trucks with commercial tires that failed in off-road conditions, aircraft unavailable to effectively suppress Ukrainian air defenses, museum pieces like the T-62, T-55, and possibly even the T-34, from all the way back during World War II, making their way to the front line. Perhaps most damning was the so-called modern equipment itself. Those supposedly advanced T-90M tanks, many were found with what should have been reactive armor blocks filled with sand and cement instead of explosives. The feared attack helicopters and fighter jets, plagued by navigation systems so unreliable that pilots taped commercial GPS units to their dashboards. And what about those next-generation weapons that caused so much concern in Western defense circles? The T-14 Armata tanks made a brief appearance in 2023 before being withdrawn. They either failed miserably or were too expensive to get blown up by cheap drones. The Su-57 stealth fighters have conducted only limited strike missions from safe distances within Russian airspace, lobbing glide bombs, the one saving grace of Russian military tactics, which also harken back to its Cold War weapon stores. But how could Russia's military leadership so catastrophically misjudge both their own capabilities and Ukrainian resistance? The answer reveals something fundamental about Putin's Russia. Russian intelligence services believed that Ukrainian forces would immediately collapse and that most Ukrainians would welcome Russian troops as liberators. This wasn't just a military miscalculation, it was a fundamental failure to understand reality, driven by the very propaganda machine Putin had created to maintain his grip on power. One of the fatal flaws of the authoritarian regime that Putin created in
When the
Russia
war's over, imagine like driving through this area. That must be straight up Fallout.
is that it completely depends on Putin's image as a leader. Brookings maintained that this is only tenable so long as the autocrat stays in power, which can severely damage the longevity of the country as a whole. Former Kremlin advisor Gleb Pavlovsky, now in exile, explained it more bluntly in his April 2022 interview. This is all Putin's own personal decision. Nobody, including myself, realized just how maniacally obsessed he must have been with Ukraine. We underestimated the extent of decay of the Russian government. Remember, this interview was only a month and a half into the invasion, and the same sentiment rings true 3 years later. The Russian military itself became a victim of this distorted reality. Corruption was endemic but hidden from official reports. Training exercises were choreographed performances rather than realistic preparations. Equipment maintenance existed on paper while actual hardware deteriorated in storage. This is underscored by a closer examination of Russia's military doctrine. As a holdover from Soviet times, Russia's perceived biggest risk was a NATO invasion. To that end, Russia created operations and strategies to defend the motherland rather than invade. Its concentrated command structure would help it shore up weaknesses in defenses, but it also opened itself up to rampant corruption and power reshuffling once Putin came into power. With Russia losing momentum, there's a possibility that Putin himself could be ousted from the Russian throne. After all, he would be quickly found solely responsible for the disaster, and power-hungry politicians in the Kremlin would need to save face by removing him. However, Brookings succinctly analyzed that Russia's current political structure doesn't really have a viable candidate to succeed him, and that the entire regime might not survive a leadership change. This opens up a chance that Russia itself could collapse. This would happen in a few stages, but they would progress rather quickly or even coincide with one another. First, there's the economic breakdown. Russia's war economy is already showing severe strain, with defense spending crowding out essential services. As casualties mount and sanctions bite deeper, this becomes unsustainable. Critical infrastructure, already suffering from underinvestment, begins to fail more frequently. Second, political fragmentation. Regional governors, especially
Every time I see the Kremlin, I'm reminded of the Red Alert 2 mission.
in resource-rich areas like the Far East, begin asserting greater autonomy from Moscow. Initially presented as an economic necessity, these moves gradually acquire political dimensions. Third, military disintegration. As the professional army is ground down in Ukraine, Russia increasingly relies on poorly trained conscripts and ethnic minorities from peripheral regions. Unit cohesion breaks down, desertion rates skyrocket, military equipment fails without replacement parts. Finally, the central authority collapses. Whether through a palace coup, popular uprising, or simply the inability to project power to Russia's vast regions, the Moscow government loses effective control over significant portions of Russian territory. The consequences would be catastrophic, and not
the man had to call North Koreans, man.
just for Russia, but for global security.
Unthinkable
The Federation would likely collapse into a series of states resembling the breakup of Yugoslavia or the fall of the Soviet Union itself in the
I don't know, it's kind of unthinkable to see that in our lifetime, right? But you never know. One thing I learned in my 34 years now, you never fucking know. World is goddamn insane.
The core of the country, Moscow and St. Petersburg, would likely attempt to relocate Russia's nuclear weapon reserves and proclaim itself the successor state, saber-rattling with the arsenal much like Putin does during the war. Scores of immigrants would try to enter the EU again, going after the successes seen by former Warsaw Pact members like Romania and Poland. China might swoop in and occupy swathes of resource-rich territory in
It's the biggest delusion recently on stream. It's like his opinion, it's a bit of yapping. You don't have to...
Siberia for itself to fuel its bottomless industry.
Thank you, Goat. How you doing?
So the next time someone confidently tells you that Russia is winning in Ukraine, you just need to go back to the beginning. After 3 years of what was supposed to be a war that lasted a few days, Russia controls just 20% of Ukraine, has suffered casualties approaching 1 million, has devastated its economy, destroyed its international standing, reinvigorated its adversaries, and has no viable path to actual victory. The truth is that Russia isn't winning. It's trapped in a strategic disaster entirely of its own making, with no good options and no clear exit. The longer this war continues, the more catastrophic the consequences will be for Russia itself. But what do you think? Thank you as always for watching, and do leave your comments below.
That's what I'm watching off stream. That's what I'm watching off stream.
She slipped in my fingers like sand. Heard that she had a man. Now I'm just sitting here sad. Oh well, ship sail. She slipped in my fingers like sand.